Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.
Welcome to Remission Possible, the podcast dedicated to guiding and supporting you on your mission to achieve lower disease activity. We understand that this challenge wasn't something you asked for, but remember, you are stronger than you think, and you deserve the opportunity to regain control and live your best life. In each episode, we'll share inspiring stories from patients who are succeeding in their mission and discuss how patients and doctors can work together to better understand the optimal course of treatment for different chronic conditions while keeping personal goals and lifestyle choices in mind. In today's episode, we'll hear from Nathalie Robertson, a Canadian patient who was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in 2003, shortly after getting married. Nathalie has always been, and continues to be, a very active individual. She works full-time, enjoys spending time with family and friends, loves kickboxing, and is a voice for the patient community. We will be discussing Nathalie's personal journey with rheumatoid arthritis, including the decision to start a family with her partner while managing the condition, the different types of treatments Nathalie has tried, her experience advocating for herself to receive the best care, and how she defines and reached remission in her daily life. Whether you're a patient in the early stages of your journey or someone looking for inspiration and motivation, this podcast is for you. So join us on this mission as we empower you with valuable insights and tips to break free from the cycle of pain and anxiety and ultimately bring you closer to achieving low disease activity. It's time to rewrite your story because remission is possible. Hi Nathalie, merci d'avoir accepté de partager ton parcours avec nous.
Ça me fait plaisir, merci.
For those of you who don't speak French, I just thanked Nathalie for joining us today and sharing her story. And Nathalie, you said...
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you.
Thanks again very much, Nathalie. We had to sneak in a little bilingualism, especially since you're Canadian. And selfishly, I don't want my French to get too rusty. And thanks again. If you want, we can just get right into things and maybe you tell us a bit about yourself, your name, age, where you live, and the condition you live with, as well as your profession.
Sure. I'm Nathalie Robertson. I'm 51. I live in Ottawa, Canada. I work full-time. I currently work for the federal government, but have experience working in both the for-profit as well as not-for-profit industries.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I also wanted to ask if you could expand a bit on your personal journey living with rheumatoid arthritis. Anything from the road to diagnosis to your decision to start a family and maybe where you are now.
Absolutely. So as you said in the intro, I was diagnosed in 2003. So quick calculation, that's about 20 years ago. And it was a bit of a rocky road. At one point, I was fine, like no issues. And then at one point I fell on some ice and my knee swelled up and then it didn't go away. And then other symptoms kept popping up. Didn't really know what it was, but my wedding was coming up. I didn't want to get into too much bad news at that point. So we went ahead with the wedding. And it's interesting because when you're planning for something like that, you have a lot of endorphins going on and that can suppress some issues. So my symptoms were at bay, but they came back very violently, let's just say, later, actually the night of the wedding. And then right after that as well. And then things got really bad. And then it took a while. I took a number of appointments with the doctor. I asked for tests. I knew there was something wrong because my knee was swelling and my shoulders were sore and my wrists were sore. And it was challenging when you're having a discussion with a physician and they're dismissing it and they're dismissing your pain and it's discouraging. And then at one point I brought my husband with me to have a second voice to reemphasize. And I said, look, I can't leave here without knowing something. I need a referral to somebody. I did end up getting a referral. It was very dismissive. It was pretty much, here's the paper. It's going to take you months to get in. And when I did go see the rheumatologist, I walked in. At that point, I had problems opening doors. I had problems walking. And he looked at me. He looked at a few of my joints and he said, you should have been here months ago. So validating in the sense that I knew there was something, but sad in that I had to be at that point to be able to get a diagnosis. That first meeting was at the same time good in that I finally had a sense of understanding what was going on. But sad in that, in the next breath, he said, so you have a very aggressive inflammatory arthritis. You're going to likely be on medications for the rest of your life, and you need to get ready and be prepared for that. And, while I was looking to hear what was going on, the message that this is how your life is going to change direction when you're not expecting it was a bit of a blow and does send you reeling. The discussion that we had almost right away was, okay, well, we just got married. I'm not in my early 20s at that point. You need to make a decision. Either you decide to try to have a family now. You don't know. We don't know what the disease progression will be. He made it very clear that, when your disease does progress, you can't reverse the damage. That's one thing he made very clear. So he said, maybe your disease will go in remission. Sometimes it does. But he goes, if it continues to be aggressive and it takes a long time for you to become pregnant, there are ramifications to that. So then the next question is, okay, well, what's the alternative? The alternative was, well, we get you on a plan. We try to get the disease under control, stabilized, and then you can make a decision at that point. Next question, well, how long can that take? Question is, nobody knows. It can be a year, 2 years. It's a question mark. But at that point, I was feeling so terrible. I said, okay, let's do the medication. How can I care for a little person if I can't really take care of myself at this point? So that was the decision that we made, and then got onto the journey of figuring out what was the right medication plan for me and to start the family. I went through a cycle of different kinds of medications that were the more sort of traditional ones. And that was a couple of years. And again, that's hard on the body because every time you take one of these drugs, it impacts how you feel. It impacts your skin. It impacts your hair. It impacts all sorts of aspects. I didn't have a lot of success at that point. And then about 3 years after having embarked on that journey, I was able to get access to a biologic. And that was truly life-changing. That was a game changer. So that was about the time when biologics were making their way into the market. And that really then, was an absolute game changer. It allowed me to sort of step back and really say, okay, now where are we at? What can life actually be? And it was at that point that we said, okay, I think the disease was at a point where it was stable enough, and have the conversations, obviously, with my rheumatologist and said, okay, what's the process to try to have a family? So we talked about the pros and cons of staying on the medications, coming off the medications. I read up on that. I made sure I was comfortable with the decision. And at that point, I made the decision to stop my medications to try to get pregnant. And I was lucky in that I got pregnant almost right away. I should actually step back because one of the things that I did decide to do, so while the disease generally kind of took a pause, slowed down, I did have certain joint damage that did continue to take place. And that was in one of my shoulders. So for some people, it's their knees, others, their wrists, feet. For me, it was my shoulder. At that point, I had the discussions and I went to see an orthopedic surgeon and had the discussion with him about what that was looking like because my shoulder damage was quite significant. And it was an interesting discussion because at that point, I wasn't even 40 yet. And he's looking at me across the table and he said, yes, but you're so young. And again, you're so young. And so, I said, I know that, but we need to talk about quality of life and where I'm trying to go. And I think I was obviously successful in making a convincing argument that I really needed to have the opportunity to get that shoulder replacement so that I could actually care for a baby. And so once we had the discussion and he said yes, he said, okay, you're in 3 weeks. So that was okay, whirlwind situation. Let's get things going at work. And I will say that, not that I've had many other kinds of joint replacements, but it was extremely painful, but it was absolutely a game changer. And so with the shoulder replacement, it really is miraculous. I mean, you have pain from surgery, but the joint pain that I was having, the reticence that I had to shake people's hands because the pain I knew that would shoot through my body when that would happen, the discomfort that I knew would happen every time I would have to open a door, anything having to do with my arm, which I'm right-handed, it was my right shoulder, driving a stick shift at the time, everything was a problem. And the shoulder replacement really was something that allowed me to be able to sort of move forward on. And then after that, that's when we made the decision to try to start a family. And I had my shoulder replacement in July of 2006. And my son was born in October 2007. Everything worked out really well. I was able to hold my little baby, and he was a beautiful boy.
Thank you so much for that. It sounds like the road to remission is a bit like trial and error. maybe a bit not unlike parenting in that regard, working hard to make sure you're doing your best. And I think you touched on this a little bit, but could you maybe talk about your experience in terms of how you advocated for yourself to receive the best possible care? Because it seems like you kept asking those questions and pursuing different treatments if something wasn't working to you. I just wondered if you could expand on how you advocated for yourself.
Absolutely. So I think one thing that's important to remember is that when it comes to anything, we're all human, right? Everybody brings a different perspective. Obviously your doctor, your physician, your specialist, they're bringing in a certain set of knowledge, but they're not you. And I'm bringing that part to the table. So it really is, to my mind, a partnership. It's something that you need to go in. You need to inform yourself. What is the disease? Read up on it. When you go in, you need to know, how are you doing? Where are you at? What are your symptoms? What are you trying to do? And go in with questions, go in with your thoughts. What I realized was my physician was very open to having the conversation. When he knew that I understood what was going on, he was very happy to have the conversation. If I was waiting for it to be a one-way directional conversation, well, that's not a conversation. That if I was just waiting on him to tell me what I needed to do, it's sort of imbalanced. And I learned early on, just to even get the diagnosis, I had to bring my husband with me. And it's intimidating because you think, well, I'm not the expert in the medical profession. No, absolutely not. But I'm the expert of me and I'm the expert of where I'm at. And so making sure that you're comfortable having that voice. And it is intimidating when you go into the doctor's office and they're saying, no, there's nothing wrong. And you're like, no, there's something not right. And sometimes just bringing somebody with you, a friend, a husband, a colleague, even if you're needing to, because also when you're stressed, you don't always hear everything, and you might forget things. And that's where they can be your backup to say, oh, you were going to talk about this. Oh, yes, that's right. Or don't forget to ask about that. Oh, right. Or if you're getting at the same time negative information back and you're processing, it's sometimes difficult to pull it all together, and having somebody with you can help you make sure that you come out with the objective that you had gone in with, which was to either get additional information, a follow-up, a referral, or whatever the case may be. So I think from my perspective, it's becoming comfortable with the fact that you have to be your advocate. And the healthcare system, things aren't necessarily connected. So you need to go in bringing your story with you. You have to go in knowing that you may have to repeat it all over again, because last time you were talking to this person and this person's not the same person and they're not in the same office and they can't share all the files. Maybe in a few years, maybe my son's generation, it'll happen. But right now you have to go in prepared. So we have a responsibility, I think, as patients, to know where it is that you're at, what it is that you're looking for. Go in with your questions and inform yourself as much as possible before, because physicians are busy. They don't have all the time in the world. They want to answer all the questions, but they really don't have the time. So when you go in, you have to be focused and you need to be very thoughtful about what is that one big thing that you need coming out of there. If you need to have a bunch of other questions answered, maybe there's other people that can help, or maybe other sources of information that are available to you. But I think just really taking that ownership and being comfortable and stepping into those shoes, which can be intimidating, I think that's a really important part.
That's a really, really important point, I think. And after hearing you talk about all of this, I'd actually be really interested to know how you define remission or low disease activity in your daily life, since, you worked hard to get there and pushed when you needed to push, sought out answers where you needed to seek them out if you weren't getting them from your physician, coming in with plans. It can really be such a challenging goal in that regard. And I think you touched on that earlier. And I'd also wonder what advice you have for others who are working toward the same goal, especially when the going is often pretty rough.
Great question. I think one of the things that I didn't talk about earlier that was really important for me is when I started to understand more about rheumatoid arthritis, and I did a ton of research in the beginning. I read up on it. I tried to find other patients who had similar conditions because I was having all these weird symptoms. And it was just like, for example, what's a trigger finger? Why is my finger stuck? What is that? And other weird things that were going on. So just to confirm that what I was experiencing, that was part of the disease. So I think for me, it was about understanding what is the disease and then understanding that the disease progresses. So it's not like the disease goes forward, and then you can go back in time to how you were or who you were. And I think for me, the hardest thing was to mourn the fact that the life as I was experiencing it was no longer there. So it was about understanding that that is done and looking forward to say, okay, what is life now? And when I talk to others who have also chronic illnesses, it's really interesting because some people, when I listen to them, it's like they want to go back and they're mourning the life that they left and they keep wanting to go back to it. And I think when we talk about low disease activity doesn't mean you're going to become the way you were. You're going to go back. The disease is where it is. You can't go backwards. And if you keep trying to do the things that you did when you didn't have the disease, you will constantly be sad and angry and disappointed. And so for me, what was really important is sort of recognizing that's who I was then, but ahead of me, there's a bunch of things that I can still do. And so rather than focusing on I can't do this, it's more, okay, what can I do? And really sort of look forward and say, okay, how do I shift what I do, how I do it, so that I can be more fully embracing of what life is in terms of what's ahead of me. An important thing that I did, especially in the early stages of my disease, was I was working at the time in a job that was pretty high pressure. And I realized that I wasn't able to sustain the pace of the work. My mind was great, but the body was just not following. And so, I made the decision at that point to change career paths. That was an important decision point in my head, in my life, because I decided at that point it was more important to make sure that my body was okay. Because if you don't have the body, we really only just have one, I'm not going to be much use to anybody. So I had made that decision at that point. That was before I had my son, because I needed to make sure that I could start to feel better, that I could start to reimagine a life where I could better support myself and my body and my disease, and really contribute to all those things that I wanted to. Life is not just living. It's about feeling like you're contributing to your work. It's about having enjoyment with your family, with your friends. It's about participating in patient activities. It's important to feel like you're contributing to life, and making sure that you know what that is important. So just to come back a bit to your question around what is remission or lower disease activity, I think it's thinking about what are those things that are important to you, and are you able to do them in a way when you're feeling okay enough to do those things in the way that you want to. So for me, it's not a particular goal, but it's like a specific measure that I can say, yes, I've hit that. But I can tell if I'm in a good place, if I'm able to do all the things that I would like to do, deliver on my objectives at work, if I'm able to spend time with my family and friends, if I'm able to do those physical activities that I enjoy, if I'm able to contribute to doing those other things that I'd like to do that are important for me. So for me, it's really a measure of that. But like I said, it's about where I want to be, and it's about letting go of what it was. And I think that's the important measure, is looking forward and not looking backwards.
That's a really good point, I think. And as you said, what helped you most was to kind of look forward and not look back. And I think that's a great message, because it also speaks to things that you could maybe do now or in the future. And maybe you couldn't do them back then, or maybe you could, but you have to adjust to a different way of doing them now. Oh, or maybe a more quote unquote safer way to do them now that responds better to your body. And I also know that one thing that might have helped you is being very active, and of course carefully, but it's incredible that you kickbox still after multiple shoulder replacements. And I was wondering if you could share a bit about how you balance being active while managing your condition. I know for some others it may seem or be a daunting feat in and of itself. And I'd wonder, in addition, what advice you might have for others looking to maintain or achieve a more active lifestyle while managing a chronic illness.
Absolutely. So yeah, I absolutely love kickboxing. But as you say, it is something that I am very careful with. I've gotten big stares from my surgeon when I said I did that. But I said I didn't hit anything. And it's more about the movement on that particular shoulder. Because as you said, I did have my first shoulder replacement in 2006. but I had a follow-up one in 2014. Any joint replacement is really important. So I'm doing everything I can to make sure that I can maintain that. And one of the best ways actually is to have really solid muscle around the joint. What do I do? I'm very careful about the exercises that we do when we're kickboxing. Obviously, no impact on that particular arm. And it's about thinking of those things that you can do. So as I said, I was lucky in that for me, most of my issues have been in the shoulders. Others, it might be in the wrists or in the feet or in the knees. So in those cases, I think it's very personal in terms of what you can do. Swimming is an excellent activity. I did some of that. What I realized, it's a little challenging I can't swim quite the same way. So it's not exactly the same, but for people who, if let's say it's your ankles, swimming is a great activity, right? So you need to find the thing or the activities that you can do that don't hurt you more. And I think that's the measure, is if you're doing something and it hurts you more than it gives you benefit, then I think you need to think about, is that the right activity for you? For me, bicycling is something that was great. I mean, I didn't have any issues with my legs or my hips or anything, so that was great. Did a lot of bicycling with my son when he was younger. Lots of walking, that's low impact, and it's great to keep moving. And one of the things that's really critical, and it's proven everywhere, is the less you do, the more you lose. So if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And exercise is important for so many things. It's important for the body. You need to maintain flexibility. You need to maintain some strength. It's important for your heart. It gives you endorphins and this is really important for just the positive outlook. And that's one of the reasons why I actually really enjoy the kickboxing. It's a physical exercise, but you feel so good after. You get the endorphins. It's like coming back from a big bike ride, and it feels good. And we need to find those things that bring us joy. And the physical activity is something that it is an important part of our overall health. Mental health is there, and this contributes to that, and obviously contributes to the physical health as well.
It definitely does. I think what you said, it really rings true with me as well. It's not necessarily about the activity itself. It's about how it makes you feel afterward or during as well. And sometimes there's nothing better than that high of coming off of a good kickboxing session maybe, or a bike ride. I know I can identify with that. Swimming, it's really about finding what works best for you. And depending on your movement abilities, period, there could be something. And I think that's really, what you pointed out, it's a really beautiful point. And maybe with that being said, how do you think people can work with their healthcare professionals to define or redefine their goals, when they're kind of readjusting their life, making lifestyle changes that could help, and to not give up on receiving the right treatment?
So I think this is where it's really important to bring to the table where you are at, because that's where the physician or your specialist or your healthcare provider they won't know that. So they're going to come at it from their research, their knowledge, what they've read, but you're the person, you're the one who's living through this. So if you say, and I remember I had this one conversation with my surgeon after my shoulder surgery, and I said, what should I do? And he says, oh, do this. But then my question should have been, is there something that I shouldn't do? And in retrospect, I said, I would have gotten a different answer, because one was limiting, the other one was not limiting. So I think it's important to come at it to say, this is what I'm intending to do. This is what I think I'm going to get out of it. Do you have any concerns with this particular approach? But at the end of the day, it's your choice, right? But that's where I think we have a responsibility to go into the conversation to say, this is what I'm trying to do. This is where I'm trying to go. And everybody's different. Everybody's pain tolerance is different. Everybody's endurance is different. We're as different as there are people around us, right? So everybody will be able to do things differently. And I think, to ask the physician for what's the prescription for them, that's putting a lot on their shoulders. And that's where, they can tell you from their medical experience, medications or maybe physical things that maybe really you shouldn't do. But then I think you need to take that with a grain of salt and say, okay, if let's say people will say, oh, you should do yoga, right? It's easy on the joints. In my case, yoga doesn't work because I have to be on my wrists, and my wrists hurt. So that's not a great exercise for me. So I think, again, you need to take what people are telling you, but I think you need to assess it. You need to determine how that meshes for you and monitor and say, okay, then try some things. I think you need to see how you're managing. I think you have to be very much in tune with how your body's feeling. Are you feeling worse? Are you feeling better? How's your mood? How's your health? How's your body? Are you hurting? Are you not hurting? Is there a negative aspect to what you're doing? And it might be different, in a day, a week, a month, a year. But I think being constantly in tune with how your body is doing in relation to what you're doing. And if something's off, then you need to adjust. But you have to be very much in tune. And, if there's a time where I'm not feeling well, I'm not going to push myself because I know that if I'm overtired and I, let's say, go to kickboxing, the chances of me hurting myself are too high. And so that's where you make a choice and say, you know what, tonight I'm just not going to go because it's more important that I don't go. It's the same thing as sometimes you need to make the decision to say, you know what, and I had to do this not too long ago. We had plans with friends and I said, I got to bail. I was so tired. I couldn't do it. And knowing that your friends and other, people who love you will accept that that's part and parcel. And sometimes you just got to decline. But you need to not be angry with yourself. You need to be not disappointed with yourself. You just need to say, got to roll with it and say, this is okay. This is today, but tomorrow's tomorrow and it's a different day.
That's right. That's exactly right. I think in a way, and to sum that up a bit, is, everybody's body is different, just as everybody is different, right? And that means everyone's road to remission is a bit different. And we talked about kind of how your healthcare provider plays a role in your health and how people can, but let's also talk about how the places we live, the countries or provinces or states we live in can have an effect on how we experience life and can influence our experiences and day-to-day life, especially when managing a chronic condition. So I'd be curious to know if you think that living in Ontario played a role in your journey with rheumatoid arthritis, time to diagnosis, your access to treatment options, et cetera.
Absolutely. So I live in Ottawa and we're lucky in this part of the province. We have access to specialists. Having worked in the healthcare related field a little bit, that it isn't the same depending where you are in the country. If, let's say, I was living in rural Northern Ontario, my time to diagnosis may have been a lot longer. I think if you are in a large urban center, you are in a better position. I wish it was different. I'll talk about the pandemic. And I think the one silver lining on that one was it really did push the availability of being able to access healthcare remotely. I'm hoping that with the advances that we've made from a technological standpoint, that, in the years to come, continue to make use of that technology to enable people wherever they live to be able to access a specialist, to be able to access the care that they need, to get the treatment that they need, because it really is life-changing.
It's such great points, actually. And I think it kind of goes back to what you mentioned earlier about advocating for yourself, to receive the best possible care. And sometimes even advocating, some people might feel like they're being asked to do all of the advocating for themselves. But there are also other people out there, if someone is not feeling up to that, on a given day or a given month or longer than that, there are also other people out there, maybe living with the same conditions, that are up to the task and that are happy to help. And I'd be interested to know briefly how you think advocacy has helped shape your journey. I know you worked with the Canadian Arthritis Patient Alliance, or CAPA, and partake in the wonderful support and advocacy they do for others. So maybe you can expand on that.
Absolutely. So I think organizations like CAPA play such a critical role to ensure that the message of the patient perspective is taken into account. And the work that CAPA does, not only to make sure that the patient voice is heard in the healthcare sort of machinery, but also giving patients information tools to better understand what is the disease, give them tools to have an informed discussion with their physician, what kind of research is available, where they can go, how they can really sort of be advocates for themselves, and how they can actually learn to have a voice, and participate in training. So I think it's such a critical role. And CAPA is an organization, it's run by patients. It's for patients. It's to create a voice for patients. And I can't say enough about the importance of the work that CAPA does. And there are other organizations in Canada and elsewhere that also do help provide that voice and that support. It's just so critical. And it makes you feel like you're not alone in this big sea, because that's sometimes, when you're at your weakest, that's how you're feeling. Just the world's a big dark hole and you're not sure how you're going to get out of it. And when you can find some support and some information, it just makes it all come together and you realize that there is a community out there and they're there to support you.
That's exactly right. It's exactly one of the many reasons why we love to collaborate with CAPA, with so many other organizations in Canada, why GHLF is doing work in Canada and around the world, and doing a podcast like this to put a spotlight on how people might try to achieve low disease activity or remission. This is so important, and it's to give voice and to give platforms to patients when they may not have had them before, or especially like you said, when they're feeling in that hole or when they're feeling like they can't advocate for themselves, they can lean on others who might actually be patients who are ready to do that, And I just can't thank you enough for sharing all of this, Nathalie. We really appreciate it. And I know that people out there listening will appreciate your willingness to share your story and advice. And actually, if you're willing to offer some parting words of wisdom for all the patients listening, especially those who might still be in an early stage of their journey, could you share 3 words with us to give them courage to continue onward to seek the best possible treatment? As a fellow patient, what would those 3 words be?
3 words. That's hard. I would say patience with yourself, being kind with yourself, and looking ahead. I'm going to add a 4th one. Be informed.
There we go. Couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, Nathalie. We really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining us on Remission Possible, the podcast where we explore the path to low disease activity and improved well-being. We hope the stories, insights, and guidance we've shared have inspired and empowered you along the way. This podcast was made possible with support from AbbVie Canada. If you like what you've heard, be sure to rate our podcast, write a positive review, and spread the word by sharing with your friends and family. It'll help more people like you find us.
Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation Podcast Network.